behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream.
Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take to you Mary, your wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. And she will bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins.
For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile a man. You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. Therefore, whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. Assuredly, I say to you that it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And again I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. We are back for another episode of The Bible Lens, episode 139. And today I'm talking about an issue that I have thought about this for a very, very long time. And when I first really came to faith and really started getting serious about my faith, it was one of my earlier revelations that what the Bible actually says is true. Because I thought to myself in this context, if we were to accept what many non-believers like to say about Scripture and the Bible and the books and the stories and all this not good stuff, they all think that it's all a bunch of hocus pocus, that it's not real, it's a bunch of fables and fairy tales and whatever the case may be, right? Anything to discredit the Word of God. That's not really a surprise here. But when I started really digging deep into the Scriptures, I started realizing that as far as sin, personal conduct, things of that nature, we as a society, and I can't just say it's as like a strictly United States American thing or anything along those lines. It's us as a society, as a people. We have fundamentally, essentially popularized sin to the point where the things that the Bible clearly defines as sin, not only do we promote these things, not only do we celebrate these things, but we've essentially made them our identity, both a cultural identity and a political identity. And when you start really looking at the core tenets of what most people in not just our country, but in our world, view as virtues, every single one of them are essentially, by biblical definition, an Antichrist position, meaning that it is a position that is in direct opposition of the teachings of Christ. Now, this is something that always bothers me when I hear people say that, I respect the teachings of Jesus. I don't know when that became a popularized teaching amongst non-believers, but it's an outright lie. It is a straight up outright lie, because these people's only understanding of the quote-unquote teachings of Jesus is don't judge religion bad and try to be a good person. Simplified one of those three, right? And that's not the teachings of Christ whatsoever. And an easy way to shut down this lie whenever someone tries to say that I respect the teachings of Jesus, the easiest way to shut down this lie is to ask them, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, that nobody goes to heaven but through him? If they say anything other than yes, they are lying to you. Because they don't actually respect the teachings of Jesus. Because that's what? That's the actual teachings of Christ. That is the words of Christ himself. So you can't turn around and say, well, I respect the teachings of Jesus. No, you respect whatever perverted, abbreviated, out of context representation of Jesus' teachings are, but you don't actually believe the words that came out of his mouth. Nor do you believe the words that are written in the book, right? That's besides the point. But I notice a much bigger problem at hand here is that, especially when you look at the political realm, when you look at just the world of politics, there is obviously multiple political parties here in the United States, but the two primary ones, the big ones, are Republicans and Democrats, right? Now, there's subsects of ideologies within those groups. You got, liberals and progressives and conservatives and nationalists and all that stuff. They all fall somewhere in between that line. But that one big shadow there is those two ideologies, the left wing and the right wing. And I've talked about the right wing in great extent over the last several months as it relates to a lot of things that's been happening on the right with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and the Hodge twins and a number of, quote unquote conservative figures, and how they've acted and exposed themselves over the last several months. I want to do the same thing with the left here, because this is one of the things that I notice. It's like, when you start reading the Bible, when you start reading, the New Testament, Paul's words, Christ's words, all of a sudden you start thinking to yourself, it's like, well, wait a second, like, this is exactly what our culture celebrates and parades around, and I quite literally idolatrizes. It's like, we celebrate the rebellion of God, and some people are so deeply ingrained into this, they've accepted what is rebellion against God as political ideology to the point where that rebellion has become their identity. Whether they realize it or not, their quote-unquote identity is essentially a rebellion against Christ. We're going to talk about that here tonight. Let's go ahead and introduce our good buddy Cider joining us here for this episode. How's it going there, buddy?
I'm all right. I had a late lunch. That's why I'm late.
No, that's no problem. Like I said, the afternoon shows, I squeezed it from, if you guys been here long enough, I used to do this at like 7 at night, but then I pushed it down to about 3 in the afternoon, because this is essentially my time in between the services. So I do like a morning service, like around like 9:30, and then I have another one that we do at about like 6 o'clock. So this gives me a good time to fill in the show and make both services. So I just kind of squeeze it all in. But, yeah, so real quick, we're just I was just giving the introduction here that this episode is all about how political identity, and a lot of words, cultural identity, became essentially an allude to sin against God and rebellion against God. Now, before we get any further, let's introduce our people who are joining us in the chat. We are here on Rumble, YouTube, and on X here today. Keith is joining us here on the YouTube side of things. Vanya is joining us here. Beautiful is also joining us here so far. And then, of course, a quick little shout out to you, Cider, from our girl Vanya. And then we got Leo Styles over there on the Rumble side of things saying hey to both of us here. So, like I said, we're just settling things in just a little bit. So, the cue you in before we get started here. I was talking about how when I first read the Bible, like really took faith seriously and started reading and understanding what it was saying, that I started looking at our world, our culture, and our politics, and I started realizing that all of these things that a certain group, not just in this country, but all around the world, celebrates is in direct rebellion against what the Word of God actually says. And we'll talk about kind of the tenets of this argument here, but to kind of put it in a smaller lens, let's look at the ideology of progressivism, and that has kind of, I guess, consumed the modern left wing here in today's day. So it manifests itself in many different ways up to this point, because you have the people out there who are like, oh, I'm just your typical classical liberal. Then you have the people who are like, well, I'm a democratic socialist, because they don't want to use the name communist because that has a connotation to it. So then you have the straight up commies. Then you have the Marxists and the socialists and all of those in between. Then you have the people who are just in denial of who they truly are. It's like they don't want to say that they're, democratic socialists socialists or communists, but they basically support every single step of the way. It's like, the only time you'll ever see them actually push back is when the commies start going after things that they like. And that's the only time that you'll ever be like, oh, I'm not with those people, but any other time you're exactly in
It's
step
like
with
the
them.
censorship of pornography has them scattered all over the political range.
Exactly, right? Like whenever someone, goes after video games or comic book movies, that's when they'll step away and be like, "Oh, I'm not like those people over there." But literally any other issue that they support, you also support too. So it's like
UK speech laws weren't a problem until they started inhibiting people's ability to masturbate when they felt like it.
yeah, exactly. Then all of a sudden it became an issue. Then all of a sudden we're free speech warriors, and it's like, stop.
Yeah, that's been hilarious watching them dressed up like Revolutionary War heroes. Like, wait a minute.
Yeah. So a big thing that I've noticed here is the rise of the democratic socialists, which, like I said, they're just communists under another name. They just found a pretty little title to call themselves because commie has a bad connotation ever since the Reagan days. So we have to be like, well, how do we tell people that we're basically communists without saying it? Oh, we're democratic socialists. It's not real socialism. It's socialism that you vote for, as if somehow that makes it not real socialism or whatever the case is. It's very, very dumb. But I mean, like I said, we have to play a lot of these games with people who are intentionally like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about here. So this was I guess you could say a rally not too long ago, but in the last 10 years, you've seen many people in the Democrat socialist left kind of take control of the party, at least in the cultural lens. You have people like Bernie Sanders, you have people like AOC, all the other members
Graham
of the squad.
Plattner now.
Is that what they're calling him now?
The guy up here in Maine, that's calling for
Oh, really?
an actual communist revolution and to seize power and to freeze up the ability of government to work through useless subpoenas. Oh, yeah, he's a full-blown revolutionary. He's the guy with the Nazi tattoo.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and this is my problem with progressivism, because this is how they identify themselves. And they always want to progress, quote unquote. They always want to reform. They always want to change. And the question no one seems to want to answer is, well, change into what? Progress into what, right?
Okay. This is something that irritates me, and I know he's done that to confuse people's idea of what a Muslim is. These guys up front, if they aren't Muslims, if they aren't Sikhs, I don't know what they are, because the Sikhs are the only people that I know of that wear these turbans.
Yeah.
The Sikhs are not going to align with Zorhan. They like money. That's one thing you learn about them in Canada. They bought up Tim Hortons pretty quick up there. They like money. They like money. I have no idea why he's done this, if these people are wearing their costume turbans or have been paid to be here, but Sikhs would never side with Muslims. They've had a terrible battle with the Pakistani Muslims forever over there.
Yeah, no, it's something that we've talked about here. I still owe you guys an episode on the whole Hinduism thing, because I really kind of talked about that more in the perspective of...
That's like 10 episodes.
So I've talked about it in the context of like the Nephilim and the fall of the Nephilim and how they influence like world society, but I haven't really given them their own personal episode dedicated to kind of exposing that religion in and of itself. The short form, they're all demons. All the gods they worship are demons, but we'll get to that kind of in the greater context in a future episode here. I want to play a little bit of this rally here, because even though the main lane, quote unquote Democrats out there try to disassociate themselves ideology from these people, this Democrat socialism, which is repackaged communism movement, has really taken over the entire left-wing sphere by storm, even though you'll still get your, Kamala Harris's and Hillary Clinton's and the Bill Clintons and all that stuff. You look at the people who are out there on the streets right now, the young people, they all gravitate towards this, right? So as much as they want to disassociate themselves from what this movement actually is, this is the movement of today's modern day left, at least in the United States. Now, obviously in other countries in Europe, you guys have different variations of this. So a lot of this may not line up perfectly with your political party, like say like in the UK or Germany or whatnot, but you have your variation of this in your countries too. And here's a perfect little rundown, quick little minute rundown of the modern day communist light.
From corrupt politicians and the billionaires that fund them, Let our words ring out so loud tonight that Andrew Cuomo can hear them in his $8,000 a month apartment. Let them ring so loud so that he can hear us even if he's in Westchester this evening. Let them ring so loud that his puppet master in the White House hears us.
Oh, that's Trump.
The guys in the front row literally don't know what
New
he's saying.
York
Look at him. They're just looking around like,
not
any minute now.
for sale.
And we will send a loud message to President Donald Trump that his authoritarianism is no good here.
They're not even, they're just sitting there quiet.
This election is taking place when we have a corrupt campaign finance system which allows billionaires in both political parties to select the candidates they want and to buy elections.
So there's a little taste of the Democrat socialist left-wing movement. Like I said, we can do an entire expose on this particular group of people, but we only have so much time. There's a lot more to get into here. Then you have what I like to call the Democrat socialist influencers of the party, which are people like, an individual who we both know very, very well, Hassan Piker, who I will say this here again. It's this thing that the left does where it's like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They don't want to fully associate with people like Hassan Piker because he tends to say the things that they're too afraid to say, too afraid to be associated with. But at the end of the day, they still fundamentally agree with all of the stances and the viewpoints that he holds. They just don't want to say it publicly like he will. Now, on that level, I kind of have to give him a little bit of respect that at least he doesn't dance around the situation like a lot of other dishonest people do. But he is essentially in line with the same Democrat, socialist, commie left movement. Very, very popular individual on that sphere, and whether you like it or not, he speaks for a lot of the movement that has been growing in this nation for the last decade now on the opposite side of things. And it's funny enough, we spend every waking day speaking about MAGA this, MAGA that. It's all about MAGA, yet we don't really give any time and any I guess light into what is happening on the left side of things. What is the anti-MAGA? Well, this is your anti-MAGA movement, and it's essentially communism. So I'll play a little bit of this. Try not to get mad. This is not a rage bait video.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Sunday Fun Day. We're live from New York, and we're headed to the Zoran AOC Bernie Sanders rally right now. We're going to be there in a little bit.
This is like Coachella, more Coachella, less any rally I've been to, including Bernie rallies.
Oh, you were a picture?
Of course.
You are my hero.
Oh,
great.
Wow.
Nice to meet you.
Gross-old ladies that want to jump his bones.
Funny, right? And like I said, there's certain people within the left who don't, like I said, they want to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out with it on and try to make it seem like, oh, he's more fringe, he's not a part of the mainstream. It's like he absolutely is, just like the Bernie Sanders and the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars. It's like they don't want to be associated with the optics of jumping in bed with these people. But like I said, in the grand scheme of things, at the end of the day, they're lined up perfectly in tow ideologically with these people.
I watch you all the time. I'm a 20-month subscriber.
Wow. Thank you so much for watching.
This is what
Thank you for being here. Nice to meet you guys.
sounds
We got to keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We'll be around. I'll be around.
I mean, when they're actually speaking, we'll stream from here. But in between, we'll probably roll around.
Of course. Nice to meet you.
I'm a public defender now, and it's all
Oh, hell yeah.
watching you. Do you mind if I take a picture?
Of course.
Like I said, he's a celebrity amongst his people.
I would hope so.
What's good, King?
Oh, are you streaming right now?
Oh, yeah, we're live.
I just want to tell you, I used to be a Republican, and you kind of changed my whole trajectory, so thank you.
Hell yeah. Nice to meet you, man.
We are facing extreme
repression.
What do you think Donnie Wynn means for the Democratic Party and its identity?
What
You
am
make
I
my job a
looking
lot
at?
easier. I can just point to him.
There's a man at a political rally wearing a ski mask. What happened? How did he get through security?
Bro, I'm pretty sure this took place like during the fall. It is not that cold. You can remove your mask.
Be like, see, it works.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, I used to have to like beg the politicians to understand. I was like, please, like if you just
between Rob and Banks, man, you got a minute for an interview.
Democratic safety net expansions, people.
I'm about to knock over this bodega down the street here once I'm done here.
What can I say about Andrew Cuomo? He's a disgrace. Look who it is.
Now, again, they all loved Andrew Cuomo just a handful of years ago until they decided that they didn't like him anymore. It's funny how that works.
And they don't want to talk about that time he killed a nursing home full of people either.
Yeah, like, wasn't it funny how it was just like less than 5 years ago, Andrew Cuomo was the hero of the left, especially among the Trump resistance?
Yep.
And now also, he's a disgrace. I hate that guy. I can't stand him. It also just goes to show you how easily they'll flip on you. So...
My king.
I'm standing behind Hassan so that he gets a couple of people
to the front, you said, or to the...
If I was in front of him,
we're going to the floor to take a photo?
He would be completely mobbed. Everyone would be ignoring.
I know that guy's been in a bunch of like comedies and TV shows or whatnot. And like I said, if you guys don't think that your favorite Hollywood celebrities aren't also fans of, this side of the aisle here as well, then, I mean, you're sadly delusional.
Him, he can't compete with an actual Hollywood star. He's just a streamer.
Bro.
We will fight Donald Trump by showing up for our neighbors, Asians for Zoran.
Neighbors.
Look around you. This is the new
Bro, he didn't say Turks either.
And I will say this here too, just kind of on a little sidebar. In the grand scheme of things, we have to kind of keep this in context. This was all centered around a New York City mayor race, right? New York City, which is aggressively left-wing. This was basically like a slam dunk election for them. So they're trying to frame this as like this is some major political shift in the United States of America, when in reality, you're talking about a city that is, if we're being honest, maybe about 80-20 Democrat and overwhelmingly progressive out of those Democrats to begin with. So it was almost like, okay, you get the most furthest left-wing popular candidate you can, he's going to win in a rout. And there wasn't really any question about whether that was going to happen or not. I mean, even then, the opposition to him was Cuomo, who decided to run as an independent. But essentially, you're talking about two left-wing candidates regardless. So the only distinction is how far to the left do you want to go?
And that's just it. Is like Hassan is the safety barrier, I guess, is what they like to keep around here. Is that when you get too close to his political ideology, you need to pull back, or you're about to crash into failure. Mm-hmm. And he's even here complaining about Mamdani not naming every country in the world that could possibly occupy New York. So it's very annoying.
It bleeds into something we'll talk about here in a little bit.
I don't know. Have you Googled Hassan Piker 911?
What's up, man?
You work with Michael Moore?
No way. Love Michael.
Yeah, we know you pirate his movies, but he loves.
I do.
He loves people pirating his movies for a good cause.
I would have assumed he wouldn't have issues with it. Yeah.
Exactly. Ladies and gentlemen,
it's not piracy when we do it. That's essentially what they're saying. There,
the champagne socialist that goes around in a Porsche has to pirate movies. Can you believe it?
Yeah. Right.
Only you knew how bad things really are.
So that's just a little taste of what the modern left in the United States of America, and like I said, I'm pretty sure where you're at in the world, you've probably seen a variation of this as well. Probably a little bit more outright communist if you're somewhere in like the European section of the world, where they don't have to hide things as much as they do here in the United States. But this is essentially what we're getting down to. So before we go any further, I want to stop here at the book of Isaiah. Here, we're going to read a couple of verses here in the book of Isaiah, because I think that in the context of what we're talking about tonight, this is a perfect representation of not just the left-wing political party, but really our entire culture as a whole right now. Because I was thinking about this, and we'll probably talk about it here next week, because I don't think we're having enough time to discuss it here today. But along with rejecting God, there's consequences to rejecting God. You're seeing that in the modern left-wing party, but as a result of doing that as well, we've given ode to this country to two very, very evil forms of philosophy, which is nihilism and absurdism, which is bothly, they're indistinguishable in certain aspects, but basically is that, well, there is no God, so the world doesn't mean anything, life doesn't mean anything, so just do whatever you want, and suicide is an acceptable option, because if nothing really matters, then, I mean, what's the point of life? And we've seen that really just drenched in our culture over the last several years, where television shows and movies and political rallies have all just been drenched in just nonstop nihilistic viewpoint and absurdist viewpoint, and people kind of adopt that as the norm. And then you wonder why depression is at an all-time high, suicides are at an all-time high, antidepressant use is at an all-time high. It's like there's a correlation for that. It's like when you turn your back on God, you basically turn your back on really the only source of good and happiness that you'll ever have in life, and you're turned over to the only source of evil, depression, anxiety, so on and so forth, which is the side of Satan. And we see that manifesting in a lot of people. Now, they'll never admit that that's the reason why it's happening, but that's the reason why it's happening. So let's go here to Isaiah 5:20 here, because essentially what we're talking about here are people who call good evil and evil good. And this is something that we have seen in our culture a lot here in the last several years. This whole propping up what the Bible calls as wicked, unrighteousness, or straight right abominations, propping those things up as good. But anyone who holds to a biblical standard of righteousness, those people are bad. And we see that a lot in our society now. Verse 20 here says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who exchange darkness for the light and light for the darkness, who exchange bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight." This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. I'll just quick little pause here. You know, I got into it last year with, you know, a person who I make this very same point with, and here's the point that I make. When people reject God, right? When you reject God's standards of righteousness, when you basically read the Bible and it says, oh, well, the Bible says that LGBTQ is bad, well, I reject that. The Bible says that, you know, pro-life is the position, I reject that. I reject this, I reject that, and we'll talk about all the things more specifically here in a second. But when you do that, what you do is that you reject God's standard of righteousness, which is the only standard of righteousness. Because guess what? When you die, you're going to be judged. Your life is going to be judged on God's standard of righteousness, not your own. So this idea that a lot of people have that, well, I'm a good person and I do good things, or this person's a good person, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, what is your standard of good? And because these people reject Christ, their standard of good essentially becomes themselves, which means that in their own minds, they are their own God. They create their own rules. Go ahead.
Tear it back. Well, the rule thing right here is that they believe that they're in the good, and the people they support are in the good because those people are advocating for less resistance, meaning less pushback against these same-sex relationships. Less pushback against these public displays of, you know, sexual identity, you know, less pushback against these violent images that you see practiced against a certain group of people, you know, and where you're allowed to celebrate that and that sort of thing. And anyone trying to not allow those things to spread at even any rate, you know, let alone stopping it, but slowing it down even, those are bad people. Because why would you be opposed to those things? Because they don't affect you. It's one of the most bizarre things I think you might remember from being a millennial is that our leftist opposition was constantly saying it doesn't affect you. Why do you care? On every issue, it doesn't affect you. Why do you care? It doesn't affect you. Why do you care? And that was something that was constantly thrown back in our face. It's like, well, we're kind of called upon to care about these corruptions in our world because guess what? I live here too.
Yeah. And that gets into something that we'll talk about here too. It goes back to what I mentioned earlier. It's like they view it as you're standing in the way of progress. But again, the question needs to be asked again, what are we progressing to?
Right.
What are we progressing to as a society? You can make an argument in a lot of ways. Hey, there was this area in the Bible in Genesis that got utterly destroyed by its depravity, and it was called Sodom and Gomorrah. And ever since then, it's like, well, are we progressing to essentially another Sodom and Gomorrah state? Is that what you guys want? And if you look at what was going on during that time period, many would probably say yes. And we'll unpackage all this here in a second, but let's get to verse 22 here. Woe to those who are mighty to drink wine, the men of strength to mingle strong drink, who justify the wicked for a reward, who take away the justice of the righteous from him. Therefore, the fire that devours the stubble and the fire that consumes the chaff, so their root shall be in rottenness, as their blossom shall go up as dust, because they have cast away the law of the Lord of hosts and despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. Now, this describes a lot of people that I can think of off the top of my head, but essentially these are people which, as this verse says, throw away the law of God, which means that they reject the law, they reject the word of God, and they reject the God of Israel. So this isn't just, I just don't believe in any gods, or I just don't believe this and that. It's like we always ask ourselves all the time whenever someone blasphemes Christianity or blasphemes Jesus Christ, oh, well, how come they don't do this to Muslims? How come they don't do this to the Jews? How come they don't do this to the Hindus or the Buddhists and whatnot? It's like, because that's not the God that they're rebelling against. Plain and simple.
Well, and we also have to, if you want evidence of it, just take a look at what's going on with these Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. You have all the roots and seeds and free advertising and 3 generations of fans that are all built into this, and it's dying. It's barely a puff of dust left in the wind now to keep people excited. We've got all this crazy stuff happening now. It's like an amazing theme park where we're just throwing everything at you now. Please don't abandon the brand. And that shouldn't have happened, but it did, because the people involved with this, top down, left and right, are all corrupt in what they worship. I mean, you've got Chris Pratt mingled in there, but he's, again, a very small minority in this, and for his role that he plays in the grander scheme of things, an even smaller minority in it. So the vast majority of people involved with this have a very dark interest. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's all going to culminate into something here. Verse 25 here, final verse. Therefore,
yes, it'll culminate into doomsday. Not the movie.
Yeah, just read Revelation again, then you'll start making sense.
Yeah, therefore, Victor Von Doom isn't in that version.
Yeah, right. No Robert Downey Jr. Starring in this version of how this plays out.
There you go.
Therefore, the anger of the Lord burns against his people, that he has stretched out in his hand against them, and he has stricken them. The hills trembled, their corpses were torn in the midst of the street. For this, his anger is not turned away, and his hand is still stretched out. We'll kind of bring this back together here on the second half of this portion, but I want to get here to this article that I finished earlier today, and it's basically talking about this core issue, why progressive theology has essentially become demonic rebellion repackaged as political identity. Now, I will say this, if you guys don't know, shocker, this was AI generated. I did not tell AI to draw these people as hippies. I just told them to create democratic socialists, and they just assumed that those people were hippies. Take that as you will. But
you can smell this picture.
Yeah, right. And the people behind, like I said, I did not tell it to do that. It just inherently knew that, yeah, these people probably look like this. So just throwing it out there. So let's kind of start here, because what I did earlier this week is that I went to the core tenets of the democratic socialist platform, being like, okay, tell me all the things that you guys support. Tell me all the things that you guys are in favor of, and by your own admission. So it's not like, oh, well, you're just taking this person out of context, or we don't really believe and support this. No, this is straight out of the horse's mouth. So anyone who identifies with the Bernie Sanders, the AOCs, the Mandanis, the Omars, all that group of people over there, What I did is that I took your entire platform that you say that you support in your own words, and I lined it up not only against scripture, but I lined it up against something that I don't think too many people actually think about. It's like, well, let's look at, those old time other world religions, and do some of these positions actually match up better with the pagan world religions than they do with the Bible itself? And you get a lot of very, very interesting answers as a result of that. So let's unpack this. Democrat, socialist, and Marxist-influenced progressive left-wing platform now dominates the mainstream Democratic Party, and it has for a while. Like I said, the Obama class, the Hillary class, the Bill Clinton class, the Harris class, they've tried to downplay the radical elements of their party. But when you look at the quote unquote youth movement, those people who are between the ages of like 20 to 45 basically now within that party, the overwhelming majority of them fall into this ideology. You can't separate them, which means that if we're still doing this here in 20 years from now, this will one day be the mainstream Democratic Party. And at that point, the only way it's going to escalate even further is going to be full-fledged, unapologetic communism. There just won't be any other way around it, right?
They're already calling for revolution every time they get together over these shootings that happened with ICE. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, right?
They were calling for revolution. And they weren't calling for the revolution where, George Washington revolution. They were calling for the, Lenin style. The Trotsky style.
They always want change. It was like, well, change into what there, pal? And then as long as they never answer that question, they can always downplay it or what they love to do is just play dumb. Like they don't understand the accusations against them. It's like, oh, why is it that you think that we're communists? Or are you listening to Fox News? Is that why you think that?
Even when you ask them, what do you want to change into? They won't even tell you the 90s. Just every point in history is the most awfulest it could possibly be, even this one. We just need more communism to fix it.
Yeah, because according to the progressive left, the 50s were terrible. Anything before there was basically Jim Crow. Anything before that was slavery. So then it's like, was it the 60s that you guys loved? It's like, I can't have that because JFK. What about the 70s? I can't have that because of Nixon. The 80s, can't have that because of Reagan. So what, the 90s is that? Well, there was a lot of racial stuff going on in the 90s, so we can't really point that there. What about the 2000s? Oh, well, gay marriage wasn't legalized yet. So at some point you realize that their ideal version of America is basically anything within the last 10, 15 years that doesn't involve Donald Trump. And if it does involve Trump, it was the worst thing ever. So they can't really pinpoint where their utopia actually occurred. It's the same thing when you ask them, like, okay, well, which country do you guys want to emulate, right? And if you asked them 20 years ago, they would have told you Venezuela, and then Venezuela collapsed. So now they're trying to tell you that it's like Sweden and Denmark. And Sweden and Denmark keep saying, we're not socialist, stop calling us that, but that's the only example that they can hold on to. It's like they can't hold on to any other example. Like some of them now are more open or comfortable with pointing to China, even though China is very, very communist and it's been kind of obvious for 100 plus years now.
Also crashing at this very moment.
Yeah, right. So they'll hold on to that as much as they can. It's like, no, just look at the pretty LED lights on the buildings, and then don't look at the fact that the buildings are empty because we didn't finish.
I can't wait until they start citing the communism that Superman Red Sun had in the comic books. They're just completely abandoning reality. Like, no, fictional communism is like, we want the Star Trek communism, guys. Eventually, they're just going to have to abandon reality altogether and start referencing this totally fictional form of government. We want the Dune government. It's all run on space cocaine.
Back here to the article, God declares sin and rebellion, but progressivism reframes it as justice, equality, rights, and progress. It is not politics. This is a counterfeit theology whose tenets trace back to the worship of devils found in the ancient world, and we'll explain exactly why later on here. So if you're a God-hating atheist somewhere between the age of like 25 and 40, somewhere within that time frame, right? You probably thought to yourself that your ideology is, one thing that I guess you endear to it is that it's not based on the Bible and the fairy tales like the conservatives are, but you also are convincing yourself that somehow you're making the world around you better than what it was a few years ago when everything was bad, right? So
that tracks.
The default reaction has to be that for a lot of these progressives, they truly have to accept the fact, even though they complain about absolutely everything going on in the world right now, you have to accept the fact that things are inherently better now in 2026 than they were in, let's say, 2006 or 1996 or 1986. Because if you go back even further, that hurts essentially a tenet of your political ideology. So it's this weird thing where they have to convince themselves that life is better now in 2026 than it was in 1956, but at the same time, everything is awful because of Donald Trump.
Yep, double awful because he got back in.
Yeah, which you think at some point is just exhausting, right? Like you think that's just exhausting and an ideology to have.
Apparently, it's okay to have Nazi tattoos, provided you just tell them you didn't know, and then when you admitted you did know, you just say you're sorry. And they're like, okay, well, he said he was sorry for getting Nazi tattoos.
Or better yet, just claim you're from the Ukraine, and then they won't even question it ever again.
That's true. I was in Azov battalion. I was brainwashed by all the Facebook brains.
Just go, I was fighting Putin, brother. It's like, okay, well, that's good.
Oh, you're good, man. That's fine. You can go back to goose stepping now.
Yep.
Especially if you're up in Canada.
We'll get to them. The same by the way, has anyone heard any note of Alberta, whether they're going to succeed from Canada? That would be hilarious if they do.
They got on the ballot apparently there. So
well, we'll see. The same demonic principalities that demanded child sacrifice to Moloch, temple prostitution to Ishtar, and lawless rebellion under Baal now mask their progressive policy planks in the Democratic Socialists of America solutions. The Democrat platform language, progressivism, is ancient idolatry reborn, calling evil good while professing itself to be wise. It says the following exposes the core tenets of the progressive theology. Each one is in a direct inversion of God's creative order and the revival of ancient demonic cults. So again, this is going to be a hard point for a lot of you guys to understand here. But when we say that these things are demonic, I know a lot of you can't think of anything outside of the realm of the current time period that you live in. So your entire worldview only really starts at like 1990 to about now, right? We're talking about
in the chat. You guys are geniuses. We like you.
Yeah, you guys are cool because you listen to this show, but there's a lot of other dum-dums out there. So, but what we're talking about here are beliefs, ideologies, and practices that go back thousands upon thousands of years, meaning that before anyone in your entire lineage even thought about one day conceiving you, these things were in practices in societies that are outright demonic, and now they've just been repackaged to you years and years later as political platforms. So here we'll explain here. The first 10 is kind of an obvious one: abortion. Now, the abortion debate has been going on forever and ever and ever. And 20 years ago, the abortion debate was much different than it was, let's say, 10 years ago. Because 20 years ago, someone who was pro-choice, quote unquote, would just tell you that, oh, it's just a clump of cells. It can't feel any pain. It's not a real human. It's a zygote. So don't feel any bad about, aborting the child because it's basically just a mesh of, skin cells or something like that. And people believe that for a very, very long time. Now, the reason why that argument won people over for so long is that they never actually showed you the process of what an abortion actually was. No one actually saw that. It's like, oh yeah, for an abortion, they literally dismember a fetus inside of a woman's belly and then take it apart, suck out all the body parts, and then just leave it in basically a compost bag with a biohazard sticker attached to it. And when people started figuring that out about 10 years later, all of a sudden they were like, well, wait a second, this is abortion? Well, you said it was a clump of cells. That doesn't look like a clump of cells to me. So what happened? obviously, when that got exposed, you only had to go one of two ways. One, you go with the, oh, wait, no, I was totally wrong. I'm not supporting this anymore at all. Or second, you double down. And most of them just chose to double down. And then all of a sudden, the language shift to, well, the baby is actually a parasite. And, oh, you're going to force me to keep this child against my will? Are you going to put all your money in to raise this baby and all this stuff? So then all of a sudden, it just became flailing, right? Because the argument that they presented to you previously had fallen apart, but they're not going to remove from their position, so all of a sudden just became a double down here. So in the context, the Bible forbids murder outright and identifies the unborn as a full human life under God's protection here. Now, I'll give you guys the link to the article here if you guys want to look at the notes, because I've included scriptures in these notes here too that you guys should check out on your own time. But you can look at Exodus 20, Psalm 139, Jeremiah 1:5, other verses that talk about this. Leviticus and Jeremiah condemn child sacrifice to Moloch as an abomination God never commanded, right? The ancient Canaanites and the Ammonites burned infants alive in the fiery altars to secure fertility, prosperity, and demonic favor. So in the context of Moloch worship, right, these people would literally kill their firstborn babies, sacrifice their firstborn babies, thinking that it was going to bring them great prosperity in their lives, right? Now, in the context of Canaanite worship, what was happening there is that these demonic entities were deceiving people into killing their firstborn children because they were essentially trying to stop the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ on the cross. So they think that, well, if we just get all the people in the land to kill their firstborns, then the prophecy of the Messiah can't come true. And that's how Moloch worship started. But the idea of that is still present to this day, because what you hear from many people on the left-wing individuals, celebrities, so on and so forth, oh, well, you know, I got this abortion when I was, you know, insert age here, and then by doing that, I got to pursue my dreams of going to college and getting that office job, and if I didn't abort that baby, I would never be on Saturday Night Live. My career wouldn't have taken that. It's like you had people who literally accepted Oscars, a golden statue saying that I'm crediting my abortion because had I not got this abortion, I would have been standing here right now accepting this golden statue that's in no way, shape, or form an idol of Moloch whatsoever. Right?
Gee, guys, why are the children depressed? How come they don't play outside in the sun anymore? Why do they just stare aimlessly and doom scroll on TikTok and YouTube all the time? Could it be that we tell them from every possible direction that adults don't want them and they're a burden? Weird, huh?
Yeah, right? And especially you go so far of being anti-child, you have people who, shocker, are also on the progressive left who go out there and tell everyone, yeah, you know, I'm 48 years old, but he's like, I don't want kids because kids are a burden, man. I can just sit here and smoke weed and play games all day. I can't do that if I have a child. Or even take it a step further, these people who call themselves dog moms and cat moms and kind of replace essentially animals as a substitute for children. And people like, you know, our good buddy Phil Brooks, aka CM Punk, who just got his late dog tattooed on his chest, a 48-year-old man who's been married for 11 years, has no kids, has no interest in having kids, but his dog dies and he treats his dog as the equivalent of a child and gets his tattoo to his own body. But that's normal when you're in the progressive left bubble. This is what they normalize there, right?
Why would you want to bring a child into all this suffering and awfulness? Suffering and awfulness is prolonged and proliferated by these very same people.
Exactly. But progressivism essentially reframes this exact ritual as core reproductive freedom, right? Or even worse than that, they just call it healthcare. Because this is all about the woman. We don't really care much about the child, but this is all about a woman's right to choose, right? Because what happens if she has a baby that she doesn't want? Now, when someone says, well, perhaps maybe you shouldn't be sleeping with people, having unprotected sex with people that could result in a pregnancy that you do not want. But whenever you say that, they look at you like you're crazy and yell at you and start flinging poop in the air. It's like somehow that's not a reasonable solution to the problem here, right? It's like, no, we can't have that. We'd rather just kill the baby. And the platform of the Democratic Party demands unrestricted abortion access. You even had people on the right talk about how they should be able to abort a child up to essentially right before it's born, because it's a woman's right to choose, quote unquote, now. So, like I said, we've escalated this issue over the last several years. We've propped up people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg as heroes, cultural heroes in our society because of their stance on abortion. A couple of years ago, when Roe versus Wade got overturned and went back to the states, many people on the left had a complete and total meltdown over it, because for them, this issue of killing children, even though they don't want to say that they're killing children, is very, very important to their political ideology. And funny enough, you even have people in the Satanic Church who are now arguing that abortion is a ritual right to their ideology as well. So very, very funny how all these things are lining up together in the realm of the progressive left, right?
You have to remember, too, the biggest fighter in all that progressiveness was Barack Obama, who voted in favor of post-birth abortion. That means the baby's out, and they're just going to put it on a table and let it suffocate.
Yep. And it was like, oh, this is well, right? So I want to put this in its proper perspective here too, because there's a lot of these same people who delude themselves into believing that they're quote unquote good people because, well, I haven't killed anyone before. You sure about that? You sure that perhaps your quote unquote body count doesn't make you a bigger murderer, let's say Ted Bundy? Because you have women out there who will proudly go out there and say, I've had multiple abortions and things of that nature, right? And it's like, well, what do you think happens to those lives that you abort? What do you think happens to those? So you're someone who's had like 7 abortions. You think that those kids just went away, like they don't exist in your own little world? But this is the deception and delusion people fall into, right? Because they don't count those lives as innocent lives. So that's like, well, I didn't actually murder anyone. Well, guess what? One day you're going to figure out that actually it did count as murder, and you have several attached to your name.
Well, that's the thing, is that they always default to like, I didn't kill anybody, I didn't hurt anybody, and then like, that's your limit? That's the line of like between good and bad. You have to go all the way to murder, death, destruction in order to have a problem with somebody. That's when they become a bad person, really?
Yeah. And then as you'll see here, and then
I've always responded to that, Jacob, when they say I didn't kill anybody. I always ask them, did you love anybody?
Mm-hmm. Well, not only that, take it a step further. It's that it's like, like I said, is the line murder? Well, as we're seeing here, the left has become more and more open with supporting murder now. Like, that's not even the line anymore, right? And we'll get to that here in this list because I have that here too. But another core tenet here is the rise of feminism labeled gender equity, right? Because it can't be equality anymore, because we don't really want equality, because that doesn't guarantee equal outcome. We want equal outcome, which means that we change it to equity. So that's been another little recent tweak in their ideology here. But essentially feminism in a nutshell, this whole idea that, women are just as fit as men to serve in leadership roles, and that we need to just submit ourselves to female rule. How many times have you heard politicians and left-wing leaders make public statements like, us men, we've had a good run here. It's time for us to step aside and let the women handle this, right? You hear that all the time of these group of people.
And I don't want to make it a point of saying bad things about women on the show, but I do just want to make it known that in an emergency situation, are you trying to find mom or are you trying to find dad? Mm-hmm. Dad's the one that's got a plan. He's got the family together already. Mom's just there to make sure the kids are safe, okay? Dad's usually the one that's got the axe. He's defending the family. He's making sure there's an escape route. He's got the plan. He's got the survival gear. Mom's making sure the kids are safe. You got to remember there's a role to play in all of this. And that's why I always default to people back to the order of authority. God created Adam, and from Adam came Eve. It's very simple, the order of authority.
Yeah. And Eve was the one who was deceived, which is why authority was not given to Eve. But always when I hear that argument that people make, I say this to all of those that say that, a woman can do everything a man can do and authority and all this other stuff. It's like, you guys want to make it seem like there's no fundamental difference between men and women. Okay, let a cockroach run into the room right now. Like right now. It's like right now. And
you don't get a minute to think. It's there.
And then just analyze the two reactions of the genders.
Right. Now, in all fairness to Asmongold, that one was crawling on him and he didn't realize it. We're talking about one just wandering in on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Like somebody says, oh, there's a roach right there. And then they just watch the reaction.
Or hell, the power goes out. You remember that in school? Like the power would go out? Well, I don't know if it happened for you, but up here it would happen up here constantly. The power would go out. And immediately the halls are filled with the female teachers even screaming. It's like, what happens when you go to bed at night? You scream and you shut off the light before you get in bed? Gosh.
Yep. Great times. But like I said, God establishes his male headship with one flesh family at creation in Genesis 2, other verses that promote it here. And if you go into the Bible, especially the Old Testament, you find out that the most wicked ruler in the history of Israel was Jezebel, a lady. And why is that? Jezebel promoted the worship of Ashtoreth, a demonic god, and Baal, and forced the people of Israel to worship demon gods. And as a result of this, drew great ire in the eyes of God, where if you go and you read the story of Jezebel in the Bible, she suffers one of the most horrific deaths out of any figure in the Old Testament. And really in the entire Bible, if you really kind of compound the whole thing. But God gave her great justice for what she did to the Israelites and the people of Israel during her time, during her rule, where she did basically nothing but evil and wickedness. And this is called the Jezebel spirit in many circles here, but it's demonic rebellion against biblical patriarchy. Now you hear these people all the time talking about, we're bring down with the patriarchy, we hate the patriarchy. It's like, well, where do you think the patriarchy comes from? Do you think that the patriarchy was a secular concept that now all of a sudden that they have a problem with? Or do you think that it goes back like quite literally to Genesis 2?
So the biggest problem in all of this is that an ancient truth to this is that women stand less consequences in life. They think a child is a consequence. So if you remove that the child is a consequence and maybe treat the child as a blessing, okay, that's not a downer in life, okay? There are very few reprisals that a woman can go through that will not be met with the person hurting them also being hurt. There's no realm in which a man gets his butt beat after he's been a bit of a prick, right? He gets beat down. There's no realm where there's people like, hey, we're going to beat the crap out of you, the man who just taught that other man to shut his mouth. No. But if a woman's being smart-mouthed and she gets slapped around, well, there's men from all across the neighborhood ready to hit the guy that slapped her.
Yep.
And this is how it works for women. There's just no consequence for them. There's just no reprisal for any bad behavior or anything. So this is why feminism gets so crazy, is because there's never a lid to it. What do you do? What do you beat back against with? You can't tell them be quiet because that's the root of their argument.
Yep. And I will say this, you know, we've seen many videos online of women acting very rudely, attacking men, hitting men, kicking men, and it's the same scenario every time. The guy's just sitting there taking it, and there's like a group of like 10 to 15 dudes just standing around doing absolutely nothing, smiling and laughing and hee-hawing, right? But then the second that the man gets fed up with being physically assaulted and he defends himself, all of a sudden all the men scoop in and be like, oh, I can't believe you did that. Let's get that guy. It's like, and you see this in society all the time. It's like, I like to call it simp culture. But it's also just a massive, like, ultimately what this is, and you're seeing this in society times over, is that women have been pushed into a position of authority and men have become subservient to women. And this is why there's been a lot of issues in relationships over the course of the last several decades. This is why even in marriages, a lot of marriages are falling apart, because we're not teaching men how to be men, especially biblically men. We're teaching them how to be subservient to women to keep women happy. And that's not how you build a strong, successful marriage. It's not. No matter how but you try to gaslight people otherwise. This is why the overwhelming majority of marriages fail. And then when marriages do fail, it's the man who falls on the sword. If you have kids, good luck, because you're basically just signing up to have a miserable life for the next 20 years. If you don't have kids, you're still going to get caught up in alimony. And this is the system that we've created over the last couple of decades. And we're promoting this as progress, because it wasn't like this up until essentially the sexual revelation of the 60s.
And again, I just have to state that, like, it's not about beating down women. Everybody has a role to play. The gender roles that we're so rebelling against, they don't exist up here in Maine. But the majority of wives submit to their husbands in the sense that when the trouble hits the fan, that guy's the one who's been thinking about that stuff. They recognize that that guy's the one that sits there all night thinking about an exit strategy to something that may never happen, but he's prepared for it. You can ask any guy out there, are you ready for aliens invading? He's like, yeah, I've thought about it. You ask women about that, and they're like, oh, no, I don't think that'll happen. You know, they're like, what? Why would, who cares? You know, it's not a thought that crossed most of their minds. It sort of goes back to that meme that goes around of a guy holding a rifle looking out over the desert, and it says the masculine urge to die for your bros, you know, to your last stand of glory. And there's female responders just don't understand. They don't wrap their head around it. And that's why female leadership is ultimately plagued to fail, is because the woman, this is something I talk about with guys that just don't understand this dynamic. So I try to explain it very simply. The man is the protector of life, meaning he will die to keep life going, to keep his children alive, his wife alive, the mother of those children alive. The woman is the preserver of life. She will sell her body. She will carve pieces of her body away and cook it to feed her children so they don't starve. This is very different. She has to survive in order for the children to survive. All right? Whereas the protector of life draws a line in the sand and lays down his life in the protection of that life. It's two very different things, but both are helping the children. Both are working toward a common good of those children becoming safe and growing up into adults that can care for themselves and carry on. This is the proper way it should work, but for whatever reason, we've decided to play the musical chairs game with the preserver and the protector, and it just doesn't work. The stay-at-home boyfriend thing's only going to work until you wake up in the middle of the night and he's got a knife to your throat. It's just not going to work, honey. The male feminist tends to be the first one to go violent, by the way.
Yeah. It's almost like they're a wolf in sheep's clothing, right?
Yeah, what do you know? You go where the prey is.
Yeah, but progressive feminism, as we talked about here, no-fault divorces, career over children mandates, equality policies, you know, all the stuff of, like we mentioned here, abortion, submitting to husbands and male leadership, all this good stuff. This was all textbook Jezebel rebellion. Now, a point that I didn't put in this article here, but again, we'll probably talk about it in a future episode. If you guys haven't heard the term the divine feminine, because this has been pushed a lot over the last several years, the divine feminine goes all the way back to the days of Gnostic teaching and Gnostic beliefs. If you guys don't know what Gnosticism is, I've covered it in a few episodes here. It's essentially, let's take everything that's in the Bible and completely invert it to where God's the bad guy, Satan is the liberator, and good is good. I mean, good is evil and evil is good. It's basically all that it is, right? And there's the belief in Gnosticism that in order to reach a level of gnosis in some degree, that we have to accept the divine feminine, which is the way that the order should have been levied, because there's some people who believe that it wasn't God that created the world, but it was Sophia or some version of her that actually created the world, that she's a higher God than the God of the Bible, right? Again, complete demonic nonsense, but from that ideology comes the belief in the divine feminine, and you see a lot of people promoting that and a lot of feminist culture. So they're not only popularizing that, they're amplifying that with the future generations that come after them. And again, it's not going to lead to a good place here. So the next tenet that I have here is the LGBTQ. Now, you can make a strong argument that in the grand scheme of reality, that there is no issue more important to the left than LGBTQ rights or whatever the case may be, because there are so many people out there, and I know a lot of them, like too many to even name, who they view morality in the lens of how you feel about homosexuals. and how you feel about trans people and how you feel about lesbians, right? So their whole viewpoint, their whole mindset is that, oh, well, you don't support the LGBTQ, you don't support same-sex marriage, you don't support transgenderism, you don't support trans kids and all this other stuff, then you're a bigot, you're a terrible person, and then they unperson you and undo all these other things. But this is how highly ranked essentially the perversion is within the progressive left. And the Bible is very, very clear how it stands on the LGBTQ across the board. Some people try to gaslight you into saying that, oh, well, the Bible doesn't say anything about homosexuality. That's them trying to play semantics, because the word homosexuality didn't come around until about the 18th century. But the act of a man sleeping with a man and a woman sleeping with a woman has been talked about 1,000 times over in the Bible, and it makes it very, very clear how that act is viewed in the eyes of God. There's no mistaking it whatsoever. So for these individuals to make this particular issue such a strong tenet of their overall theology shows you that piece by piece, we're setting up a theology and ideology that is just picking apart everything that is an abomination in the eyes of the Lord and making that our culture and making that our identity. God created male and female, condemns homosexuality as an abomination, as a confusion. Many verses, we've talked about this here in Deuteronomy. We talked about the transgender issue a couple of times in 23 and 22. And then when you go deeper into the historical world, and we've exposed this a couple of times before here, that everything that you know about the modern LGBTQ movement can be traced back to the demonic worship of the demon god Ishtar, because she was the one, a Babylonian demon goddess, whose temples essentially had transgender priests, as we would know them now to be drag queens. They castrated themselves, they cross-dressed, they performed homosexual prostitution as sacred sacrifice, sacred service in the eyes of this demon god here. Everything that you can trace to the modern LGBTQ movement can be traced back to the worship of Ishtar, a demon god directly condemned in the Bible. So it's not just the fact that, it's an abomination in the eyes of the Lord. It's actually all tied back to a worship of a demon. And this is what's being popularized in our society. It's been pushed in our culture. It's been shoved down to our children now. So now people are trying to normalize the idea that a 3-year-old can go up to mommy and say that I'm a girl now, and you're going to raise that 3-year-old to be trans and then parade them around as a trans kid and demand that everyone accepts this, right? You have,
then they're also doing it with like kindergartners. Like, this kindergartner's gay, so we've got to do gay rights education for these kindergartners. We've got to teach these kindergartners it's okay to be gay and all this other stuff. And it's like, where are you getting the idea that an 8-year-old is gay? And their best excuse is, well, this little boy says he has a crush on this other little boy, and we don't want to stand in the way and call him anything for that or correct his belief, blah, blah, blah. And I'm asking them, like, well, how would he even know what that is? Like, can he separate Joey from animal crackers? Let's start there. Does he like Joey more than he likes animal crackers? It's a pretty easy question to ask this little kid. I guarantee you he's going to like animal crackers more than Joey. Is he now gay for animal crackers? Of course not.
And this is ultimately the end game of this whole movement, because as we're relaying all this now to children, saying that children can be gay, children can be trans, giving all these quote-unquote sexual identities to children, well, it's only going to be the most logical step afterwards, be like, well, we accept that children can be homosexual and trans and have sexual feelings about other children, then we can also say that, well, those children are mature enough to have sexual relations with adults. And that's basically the next one. Yeah, it's the only logical step, because if you truly in your mind believe a 3-year-old can be gay or trans, then what is your logical argument to say that a 3-year-old who's mature enough to make a decision about that is not mature enough about sexual relations with men?
Right, and there's a great comic about this where a mother won't let a child get a tattoo but drags them into the gender affirmation clinic.
Yeah, exactly. And
where's the line? How come you're not tattooing your 3-year-old with a bunch of Buzz Lightyear doodles? Why don't we just tear down that law? You should put tribal tattoos all over your kid if you want. You do like that scribble bear thing, doodle bears.
And again, this has been the progression here, because 20 years ago, people forget about this. 20 years ago, California wouldn't even say yes to same-sex marriage. That's how we got the whole Supreme Court thing in the first place. Exactly. Like the California, like the bluest of blue states, California 20 years ago did not support same-sex marriage. And the I guess the support of that position was like, oh, well, you know, they're adults. Let's just let adults do whatever adults
love
do,
is
right?
Love, dude.
It's none of your business what they do in their behind closed doors, right? That was always the argument. They framed it as an issue amongst adults. Well, now that they've legalized same-sex marriage through the Supreme Court, now almost immediately after they got that, all of a sudden it went towards children. Now all of a sudden the fight within the LGBTQ community is within children. Now you have teachers, activists, these teachers with these trans flags and pride flags all over their classroom trying to indoctrinate young children into accepting LGBTQ culture. And now we're trying to normalize, like I said, transgenderism within kids. And if you guys watched the bar room that we did a couple of weeks back, you saw the video of Generation Drag where they were normalizing little teens, barely teenagers, in full-fledged drags being heavily sexualized by 50-year-old men in drag clothes. And that's presented to you as normal.
Well, they did it with that drag kid. That was the test audience for all of that when they started doing Desmond whatever, and they started doing like news pieces about him because people weren't rioting in the streets. They were like, well, let's ranch it up and see if we can get them to riot in the streets. We'll know we've gone too far this week if they're out in the streets.
Yep. And then now you're starting to realize where certain laws were created against this community in the first place because they convinced you that, oh, it was wrong and immoral. Like, no, it wasn't.
I just saw that post yesterday about this person arguing against having laws that forbade incest. To be clear, that's sex between first cousins, brothers, and sisters, I believe. I think your second cousin is not part of that law, but I could be wrong. I don't know. I've never had to know it. Okay, I've never.
It's never been an issue that I've had to think about it.
I'm not like that guy that has the Romeo and Juliet law in my wallet from Transformers. Okay.
Yeah, right.
But
or as the old friend of mine used to say, if you just date white women, this will never be a problem.
So the thing is like they get this thing going on, right? So this person's making this argument like these anti-incest laws are only targeted at LGBTQ, and I'm thinking, what? What are you talking about? What a weird thing to say. Like, what are you telling me? You're telling me brothers now? Sisters now? Dad and son now? You're telling me that? That's what's happening?
And this is what we see here, this escalation of sexual perversion. Because at the end of the day, let's be honest here, you really don't have to, it's not a big secret, the sexual perversion within the LGBTQ community. It's like they will basically have sex with anything and anyone, and they parade the fact that they will have sex with anything and anyone. Then all of a sudden when we have an AIDS breakout or an HIV breakout or a monkeypox breakout, we have to make it seem like somehow this is the entire culture's problem when it really just affects one specific group of people. And yeah, this is the post you were talking about here, right?
Yeah, so what opinion will put you in a position like this? And there's all the swords pointed at the Tangled Girl. Yeah. And it says, this post, so whatever person says, incest shouldn't be a crime. It's literally just consensual relationship between two adults. There it is again. Any argument in favor of criminalizing it is the same one used against LGBT. Just what a weird thing to say.
You ever notice that any rule that protects children is somehow an attack against the LGBTQ? Isn't that weird? It's like, do you guys understand the optics of saying that? And to make it even a step further, because here's the other dirty little secret no one likes to talk about with this community. You want to know why they view that as an attack against that community? Because how many people who identify with the LGBTQ have been molested by someone in their family at a young age?
Well, you had Milo admit that two older Catholic fellas got at him. Mm-hmm. So, it's not too far to believe that an older brother who is very mixed up might be suffering from some type of influence, be it drugs or demons, might be up to something sideways with Junior.
Yep. Here we have the next tenet. So like I said, the whole LGBTQ perversion, I've talked about this here before. This is a textbook example of calling good evil and evil good. Let's look at the racial equality platform that we've seen in our society now for many decades. The whole thing with Black Lives Matter, and even predating that, you've had racial issues dating all the way back to the LA riots, the Watts riots, Jim Crow, slavery, everything that gets repackaged, and all of a sudden you have these new group of people who, let's be honest, was raised in a society where their first, I guess, remembrance of culture is like 2004. Like, we're at that kind of point now where they're so far removed from anything that can be described as Jim Crow or slavery. It's ridiculous, but they're all essentially programmed to be fighting for racial justice at all times, because we tell them, or the left tells them, that, oh, well, you're not equal with the white man. We need to keep fighting for equality because you're still a lower class versus white people. And this is what we're doing now in our society here too. And there has been so much slop over the last 10 years promoting racial division between people, between demonizing white people here in America and trying to put, blacks against whites and Mexicans against whites and all this other stuff. And this has been a big part of our platform in the last decade. It all started with the lie of hands up, don't shoot, which never happened. It confirmed that it never happened, but so many people ran with that lie that it just became commonplace. So everyone believes it. And then that went into hyperdrive with the whole George Floyd situation. Next thing you know, buildings are being burned down all over cities. People are calling for defunding the police and all this other stuff. And now race relations are even far worse now than they were probably in the time period of any of those other things I'm talking about. Maybe even worse than the 60s at this point. But God made all the nations of one blood and hates respecting of persons, and one who sows discord. We'll talk about this in Acts 17, James 2 as well. It says, after the flood, Nimrod's Babel united humanity in rebellion against God. God scattered the nations to halt unified demonic worship that happened in the Tower of Babel. Post-Babel, pagan tribal gods fostered division in idolatry. Progressive racial equity, because it's not equality, it's equity now. Critical race frameworks perpetuate grievance based on identity-based hatred. Essentially what these groups are doing here is that they're purposely sowing discord amongst people by purposely dividing you amongst race, which means that they want a framework where you view life in the eyes of blacks versus whites, or whites versus minorities, or insert group here versus insert group there. This whole idea that their worldview comes down to victim and oppressor. This is where this all breaks down to. The Democratic platform's equity planks revise Babel's demonic scattering as political power. So essentially what they're doing here is that they're saying that we need to tear down the system, we need to reform the system, so that way we can truly be equal, because we're not equal. So you have to convince people that they're not equal to their fellow brethren because of skin color, and that the whole system needs to change so that one day, maybe, hopefully, we can actually be in an equal system, and that always leads back to communism and death. There's just no other way around it.
Meanwhile, the 90s happened, and that, even if it had its problems, it would probably be the most racially equal period in time, probably the early 2000s as well. I remember there was a Harvard study done on graduating millennials around 2008, 2007, and it said that we were the least racist group of Americans that had ever been born here. That we were the colorblind generation, and that quickly disappeared as soon as Barack Obama came into office.
Yeah. And funny enough, that Trojan horse, that was supposed to show America just how not racist we were, how far removed from skin color we were, because, hey, we just voted a black president. That means that all the racism is done and over with now, guys. We won. And then somehow we became even more divided racially in those 8 years after Obama. Now, they'll try to say that, oh, that was because of Trump. But it's like, Black Lives Matter did not start under Trump. Not whatsoever, right?
Well, and how would Trump have anything to do with 2008? Like, he was going around saying that Obama wasn't born in the USA, but I mean, he's just a private citizen doing that. What would he have any power? What?
Mm-hmm. And that was years before he had ever decided he was going to run for president either too. Right. So I mean, like I said, they have to kind of reframe this history. And then even, we'll get to this here kind of later on, but we've been talking about the whole Trump assassination attempts, and in the eyes of the left, they equate people making effigies of Barack Obama under the same light as an attempted political assassination. So again, it's this, that, oh, my equivalent is true, and it's such a laughable equivalence, it's not even worth arguing against. But again, how many movies and television shows have you seen that have basically been like race, blacks versus white people bad, black people good, and all this other? You see it all the time. It has been commonplace, shoved in our throats in our culture, primarily in the last 10 years. You can go back further than that, but it's been really amped up over the last decade. The next tenet here, gun bans. We all know that probably the second most important tenet of the progressive left's, platform here is gun bans. Now, they try to frame it as, oh no, we just want gun reform. We just want reasonable background checks and all that good stuff. The Democratic Socialists aren't even pretending like that's what they want anymore. They just want to straight up ban guns. Like, they're not towing the line. They're not trying to deceive you into that point anymore. They just want to straight up ban the guns. And why is that? Why is it that people who advocate for the state want you to be disarmed in the eyes of the state? Because they plan on doing something that you would otherwise shoot them for. That's ultimately what it comes down to.
You just have to look at what happened in Bondi Beach in Australia there, where that fella and his friend just open fired on that Jewish celebration on the beach. And there was nothing even the police could do. The police were taking shelter. It took a man risking his own life to disarm one of them. I mean, I don't want to live in a country where you're powerless because other people didn't follow the law. That seems a bit tilted, now doesn't it?
Yeah. So again, self-defense is God ordained. You can find this in Exodus 22, Luke 22 as well. But even though the ancient pagan kings back in the day, they didn't have guns like we do here in current times, the idea of disarming or essentially nerfing the public in order to protect the leaders is not a new concept that we've created here over the last few decades. This goes all the way back to pagan kings serving Baal, disarming citizens to enforce dependence on the state. Does that sound familiar? Does that ideology sound familiar to anyone?
Yes. Yep. It's wreaked havoc across the world, where the USA has like 10 guns per citizen, as far as those count goes. In the nations where there are 0 guns per citizen, there is a threat that the state will take action. The best the French can do to scare their government is to smear the Capitol buildings with cow poop.
Yeah, good. Oh, man. We'll get to that here in a second. Another thing, and this kind of goes into our culture here, the legitimization of sex work, which is rampant in our society right now. I mean, obviously, we all know OnlyFans is the biggest example of this right now. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. You get these young, impressionable girls that's like, oh, I'll just do sex acts on the internet, place them on OnlyFans, and I'll become a millionaire. And then I can go buy a house and be a successful person. That's what I'm going to do here. People really don't understand where this originated from. That's where I want to kind of start here. God condemns prostitution as defiling of the body. So if you are a believer, your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit, and by defiling your body with other people, you are defiling the temple, right? It is a rebellion against the one flesh marriage covenant, where God says sex be between a man and a woman, a husband and a wife. And it says here that if you go back to the ancient days here, ancient worship of Ishtar, once again, the same demon goddess central to gender confusion, centered on temple prostitution, where priest and priestess perform ritual sex acts on one another as service to demons for fertility, prosperity, and power. Now, let me ask you guys this. A couple of big stories that we've talked about here over the last couple of years is those Diddy parties. And basically what that exposed was that a lot of super rich, super famous people behind closed doors would get together in mansion parties and engage in wild sex parties, a lot of times with the same sex, right? And this was going on pretty rampantly. Now, Diddy was just an example of it, but he wasn't the only example of it. But one thing that I noted when that story broke is that, well, if you look back at the whole stories of Baal worship, essentially what these individuals were doing is that they were giving up their bodies to demons so that they can fornicate with one another and have sex with each other so that the demons can use their bodies for sexual pleasure. And that's essentially what was happening during the times of Baal and Ashtoreth. And as you can clearly see, it's still happening now. You can go even further to the Epstein Island and the Epstein conspiracy. What do you think we're going on there behind closed doors? So this very practice is still happening in today's society amongst the elite, and they're essentially normalizing that with many of you people, many of the plebs, as I like to say here. But this was organized devil worship, where the body was sacrificed to demons for harlotry, and the Democratic Socialists of America explicitly calls for decriminalizing sex work and normalizing sex work. Many people on the left have been doing a great job trying to convince you that sex work is real work and that you need to treat it like it's real work. Progressive Democrats have aligned with lawmakers to push bills to fully decriminalize buying and selling sex, legalizing prostitution. So this is actually a core tenet of their platform here. And it's weird that they would choose that to be the platform that they, essentially the hill that they want to die on.
Well, and one thing to remember this too is that when it comes to this, even if you don't want to go so far into the biblical side of it, perhaps you're not ready for that, but consider this. It is the destruction of a sacred place. No person has their sexuality in such a place where they're just ready to spill it on any occasion. But this right here, this trivializes the nature of having a bond with someone that makes the act of sex important, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have that bond with that person, then you end up, like, you see all these polycules fall apart because one partner ends up favoring another partner, and the third one's left out, or fourth one's left out. However it goes, they end up falling apart because we're monogamous creatures. We're meant to pair off with one. And the thing is that it's very, even if you don't have your virginity anymore or anything like that, it's important that the act itself, the physical act itself, is a spiritual act. It's important that it is. And that's why these acts of prostituting it, turning into like getting a donut, turning it into getting your tires rotated, that sort of thing. Turning it into something like that completely obliterates the importance of why that act is so important to us as humans. So,
and like I said, we're itching closer to that. And like I said, start putting all of these things together, all of these things that are being normalized within a party that we're calling politics. People are putting this as their political identity and their cultural identity, and you start putting together a very, very interesting puzzle piece here. Another one that we've talked about a little bit that is becoming more and more popularized within many people on the left is the legalized drugs. Now, legalized drugs has always been a thing. People have always wanted to legalize weed and cocaine and all this other stuff, but primarily I'm seeing now a recent push to legalize psychedelic drugs. And this is why I say it's probably even more dangerous than all the other ones we've talked about here previously, because these psychedelic drugs, the ones that they're talking about, these DMT type drugs and the ayahuasca and stuff like that, these are drugs that literally open you up to demonic possession. We've shown you videos in the past about how people have taken these drugs and have started communicating with spirits and entities from another realm, from the astral plane and things of that nature. It's like that's literally how you get possessed by demons. You open up your mind to a world that you are not supposed to be opening yourself up to, and then all of a sudden you don't have the means to fight back spiritually against an entity far more powerful than you. And then the next thing you know, this is why people who take this end up losing their mind. If you go to cities all over the United States of America, you look at Philadelphia or Los Angeles or New York, you see people completely and totally zonked out on fentanyl right now, right? It's like they have no control over their body whatsoever. They're all leaned over and hunched up and whatnot. And it's like, what do you think this is? Like, what do you think that this is in a culmination of? These are people who are on drugs, who God knows that the type of entities that are inhabiting them right now. You can go on the internet and find people, videos of people tripping out on drugs, and it looks like they're being attacked by things that you can't see. And you think to yourself, oh man, that person's having a bad trip. Oh, that guy can't handle his drugs. What if he's actually being attacked by a horde of demons that you can't see? Because the drugs have opened him up to a world that he was never supposed to be opened up to.
Yep.
But people don't think about that possibility because they don't believe in the spiritual. They don't believe, especially when it comes from God, they don't believe that at all. But pharmakeia is the word for sorcery in the Bible. And this also goes on to describe what we would call drugs. Pharmakeia drugs is also in line with witchcraft as well. So It says here that they have not repented of their sorceries, their witchcraft. This is all talking about pharmakeia and drugs. Ancient pagans used potions and drugs as temporal rituals to induce altered states for demonic contact, oracles, and idolatry. So progressive decriminalizing and legalizing the exact same drugs that open up demonic doors to humanity under the guise of freedom and harm reduction. They're essentially trying to legalize you being caught up in a world that, I hate to break this to you, some people probably will never escape from it at all. And there's a reason why. Think about it like this. When those people take the, I think it's the ayahuasca, that when Aaron Rodgers goes to the jungle somewhere in South America and takes, and whatever the case may be, why is it that you have to be near a shaman in order to take certain drugs, that you're not allowed to be within a certain distance away? Like, why is that the case? Have you ever thought, when you watch like some of these movies like The Conjuring, and this whole idea of essentially leaving your body and a demonic entity wants to take over where you left, and you see that normalized in the movies all the time because people don't think that this stuff is actually real, even when they're seeing it happening in their own two eyes.
People who have taken ayahuasca have described being attacked by otherworldly things. Alex Jones explained the clockwork elves and how hostile they are at times, how racist they are at times, apparently. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't think that other dimensional creatures would give a damn what color you were. You were just a stinky, dumb human to them. They didn't really care what color stinky, dumb human you were, but apparently they do. Wouldn't you know? A little bizarre, if you ask me. I don't know, if I'd be an extra dimensional creature, I probably wouldn't be too concerned with what color this stinky, dumb thing trying to talk to me was, you know?
Yeah, right.
You know, but either way, well, go ahead.
No, and even then, you hear people like Joe Rogan talk about this all the time, and he encourages all his buddies to take DMT, and they talk about all the trippy little entities that they encounter, and the way that they normalize it in their mind, it's like, oh, these demonic elves that go around giving me the finger and cursing me out and all this stuff. It's like, this is just my mind telling me that I need to loosen up as a person, and one, like, just absolute delusional nonsense, because they can't come to the realization that these are demons that they're encountering here, and they're having bad experiences with demonic entities. They can't accept that, so they have to accept that, oh, this is some kind of a supernatural exploration of myself. It's like, oh my, like, the answer is right in your face and you still can't see it.
I'm just glad that all the times that I've had surgery where they've given me fentanyl, where they've given me ketamine, and all this stuff that does just really send you for a loop there in order to open you up, I just travel into the future where I have kids. I don't fight aliens. I don't make friends with aliens. The craziest thing I've ever done is go onto a space station with my daughters who built it. And that was it. I don't fight. I don't kill. I don't have crazy wild sex parties when I'm under that stuff. I just go hang out with my kids in the future and we go on vacations. That's it. I have like the lamest drug fueled fever dreams.
Yeah. And trust me, you don't want it to go any further than that.
No.
A core tenet of the communist movement is, of course, theft. I mean, it's a straight up theft. You can swing it all you want. This idea that we're going to tax the rich and steal from the rich and give to other, it's theft.
The richest 5% in the United States pay something around 60% of the taxes, if not more, somewhere around 60, 70% of the taxes. So how much do you want them to pay? You know, maybe we shouldn't be needing so much money. Wouldn't that be a crazy idea if we didn't maybe need that much? Wow.
Yeah. Why is it that we have a government that collects trillions in tax revenue? Why do we even need trillions in tax revenue?
And it's still not enough, apparently. We have to hit debt ceilings constantly, and then we find out there's millions upon billions of Somali fraud. And now there's other frauds happening. And what do you know? Our military is also getting defrauded as well. And wow, how about that? There's a lot of money leaking out for no good reason, but we still got to tax you. This is the funny thing about the communist idea is that they witness all of this and they're like, the military spending's out of control. In a communist society, you'll never guess what gets priority. It's not you, and it's not your poetry. It's really not. It's the military. China has the largest standing military on Earth with over 1 million members. They can't afford to do anything but march them around and feed them. They can barely clothe them, but they have 1 million-man army. And again, like you'd think that they'd be spending that money on, they've got these super fast trains that don't do anything except for 3 times a year when every single person in the country has the same vacation days. I'm not even kidding you. Everybody gets the same days off in China. They don't stagger it at all. Everybody's off the same time. So you have millions of people trying to move around the country, and then every other day they're not. Yeah. So yeah, communism always puts money into the wrong things that have absolutely nothing to do with your survival, but you'll never hear that out of the progressive communist left who are preaching for this type of revolution because they believe they'll get it right this time. They read the correct Wikipedia article.
Yeah. To simplify this one of the 10 commandments is literally thou shalt not steal. And if you want to go even further than that, go read why Jesus flipped the table in the first place. And then you'll have your answer.
And to be clear, Jesus said to pay your taxes, give unto Caesar what is his, obviously, but not to the excess of where you are suffering. It was never said that you should give up all that you own to the state. It wasn't even remotely
Nor
suggested.
did he say that if someone has more money from you, take money from that person because that person's bad because he has more money than you.
It was kind of the opposite. God said that it's very hard for a rich man to get into heaven.
Yeah. Exactly. And these people. Climate change, climate uniformity, environmental justice. Again, what we have here is a lot of policies that are very much anti-human in what it's saying here, yet they really, really care about the environment. And where do you think that came from here, right? Essentially, what these people are doing is that they are essentially foregoing the creator and worshiping the creation. That's essentially what they're doing here, right? And this goes all the way back to, the pagan earth goddesses of Gaia and Ashtaroth that demanded service to the creation over the creator through fertility rites and sacrifices. And a lot of this stuff, a lot of it's a money scam, if we're being honest with ourselves here. That's kind of pointing it too. But it's like, why is it that this platform is so anti-life when it comes to children and women and the family structure, but everything needs to be completely foregone in order to save the planet, in order to save animals? Why is it that you have so many people who identify their dogs and their cats as actual children and not, the babies, right? Because again, they're worshiping the creation over the creator.
We had this big debate up here in Maine about 10 years ago or so. They wanted to ban bear hunting. And we were like, no, that would be an extremely bad idea to do. And they couldn't understand why. And it came to the forest rangers coming out and explaining, if you don't kill them, they're going to come closer to your home because they have to find food and they will eventually eat everything in the forest. Okay? And they'll come for the food that you have at your house. They'll come for the trash that they smell at your house. They'll come right through your door. And we have this up here. We have bears that just enter a house. You're laying in bed and all of a sudden there's a bear that just decides to go through your door, your nice glass porch back door, and all of a sudden he's in your kitchen opening your fridge because they can do that. We've had them in cars. They'll get in because they smell the coffee. They go in to drink the coffee. They get locked in the car and raise hell. Yeah. The thing is they can't picture this because it's Mother Earth, and we're the ones that are interfering with Mother Earth because they ignore that God told us to take control of the beasts, that Adam was in charge of naming them even. They don't want to accept the role of mankind being the pinnacle of what the animal on earth is. We're not animals, but the beasts of earth, if you will. And they don't like that. They don't like the idea that we eat them either, even though they're the first in line to get their mocha lattes, which rely on milk, okay? The process by which that they arrive at these conclusions about the animals is another thing that's it's its own episode of just how people have decided to deify Mother Earth, as though we just sprang up out of the mud. We are not born from a woman or the union of man and woman. We are born from mud. We just spring up from it. You go kick over the cabbage patch and find a baby.
And again, in this worldview, this entire progressive mindset requires a rejection of God. And this is why many people who are in this camp reject God, reject the Bible, and reject Christ, because none of this stuff can be like, here's what I made a point of saying here. It's like, you can't marry these two ideas together. You just can't. One is in complete opposition of the other. So if you try to marry these two together, you're a bigger fool than people who are completely deceived by what they're getting into. It's like you can't create a team where the God and the devil are on the same side. It's just not going to work.
I apparently this is the goal of Satanists now. I have seen this posted around that their main goal is to force God to have an audience with Satan to hear him out again. That apparently is their goal now.
So here's another one, open borders. Again, this goes all the way back to the Tower of Babel. Study the Tower of Babel and why that whole thing happened. Essentially, they were trying to unify an entire world, an entire society in rebellion of God. And in many ways, we're still doing the same thing here today with globalism. It just goes back to the same core tenets of the Tower of Babel, but we're doing it in a means of we all need to come together in some axis of a one world religion or a one world theology, or just one day the entire world will be under one authority. Well, the Bible says that happens under Satan, not Christ. So anyone who's saying that, oh, we all just need to come together and put our differences aside for insert group here, that's a demonic prevalent theory. We see this pretty strongly here in a lot of open border policies, this whole idea that there are no nations because nations are stolen land or some garbage or nonsense like that. It all equates to the same thing. Here is probably the least surprising of them all. They all hate Israel. So, shocker, after everything that we've established here so far, why would we think that these people would have a favorable view towards God's Holy Land? They don't. A lot of people, especially nowadays on the left, are extremely anti-Israel and extremely pro-Palestine. Well, again, there is no Palestine. Palestine was literally a name given to a group of people that was to mock the old enemies of the Jews, who were the Philistines. And I hate to break this to you, the Philistines were not Arab. So this whole thing is based on a lie, but of course, if you've rejected the Bible up to this point, you're going to reject everything the Bible has to say about Ishmael and Isaac and Israel and, of course, the nations that surround them. So most of these people are very much aggressively anti-Israel and very pro-Palestine. The whole thing comes down to they believe that Israel is genociding the Palestinians in Gaza over what happened a couple of years ago. I noticed that whole talking point has kind of died down over the course of the last couple of months because the whole Gaza conflict hasn't really been mainstream in the last few months. But trust me, they'll go directly back to it again once it kicks up all over again. But again, it just goes to show you God said that he would bring the enemies of Israel to heel one day. You're seeing that happen now. He also said that he would bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse them. So if you noticed, a lot of people who are aggressively anti-Israel have been receiving a little bit of humbling recently. And it's almost as if that word was true, what he said in Genesis 12, just throwing it out there for a lot of people. But again, shouldn't be much of a surprise here that most of these people on here also hate Israel. Shouldn't be any surprise. You have any thoughts on that one?
Honestly, what we're dealing with is that build up to everybody has to hate Israel.
Yeah.
And this is just the latest vehicle in accomplishing that. I mean, when I was growing up, they were trying to get flotillas in there. So this has just been going on basically since the inception of Islam. But it's just been basically going on forever now. And it's a conflict that the U.S. isn't going to win. Because we're not meant to. We're not meant to have anything to do with this. And what's something that really irritates me is getting the U.S. involved in this at all. Israel can handle itself perfectly fine. We're really just tagged in here, and it ends up pissing people off to a degree where they end up having these demonstrations and these ideologies spread even quicker because that guy I don't like is doing this thing in a country I don't like. So that makes two things I don't like. So I'm going to go be throwing bombs at people in New York now. And that it just gets way out of hand for no apparent reason over a place that no American in this day and age is going to be interacting with for a while or at all. I don't plan on going anywhere near the place. Yeah. I don't know about you. I doubt many of the Palestinian protesters are going to go anywhere near the place. But they're going to be very wrapped up about it. On a conflict that they have nothing to do with, by the way, and have no background in. It's hilarious to me to see these little Midwestern Beckies raising hell about Palestine in Minnesota. It's like, well, you have nothing to do with this conflict, man.
You have absolutely no skin in this game whatsoever. You're not Jewish, you're not Christian, you're not Muslim, but somehow you're
don't
more
live
passionate.
there.
Exactly, you're right. You're not from there, but somehow all of your eggs is in that current basket. Why is that? Well, why is it that everyone's seemingly so drawn to the Palestine position right now? But then again, like I said, you start putting all these things together and you just start noticing patterns. And noticing patterns are bad, kids, so you shouldn't do it.
Here's another pattern you shouldn't notice.
Yeah, assisted suicide. I mean, this kind of goes into something we'll talk about next week here, but when you live in a world where you reject God, which means you reject the meaning of life, because you said there is no meaning of life, apparently just a bunch of molecules banged together one day, and we just showed up here, and there's no creator, and when you die, nothing happens. When you accept that worldview, well, what is the moral opposition to suicide? But what is the moral opposite? If you're going around embracing nihilism and absurdism that tells you there's no meaning to life, life is meaningless, just do whatever you want, or aka do as thou wilt, what is the moral objection to somebody killing themselves outside of the fact that it makes you sad?
Well, right, when you don't have God in there to make that objection, your divine created purpose, there isn't. Well, just one thing that we forget about this assisted suicide situation is it takes advantage of people who feel trapped.
Yeah.
It takes advantage of people who feel trapped. And I don't know any like this recent one was a young lady who had gone through being assaulted by several men at once and then apparently taunted for that afterwards. And so she had a grave PTSD condition. And she was just allowed to stew in that to the point where she wanted to die, and they had already sold her organs before she had flatlined. And so it's a machine now. It's a machine now that takes in people who are perfectly healthy, but they're having a bad day, and then farms their body parts out for profit. That's what it does. And so we end up lost in this conversation about who has the right to take your life when in reality, you really don't. You don't have the authority. One of my favorite memes that I saw about this was a Templar sitting under a tree, and there's like snow falling on him, or he's a crusader of some kind. There's snow falling on him, and it says, you who are so full of yourself as to think that Christ died on the cross for you to feel worthless.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, all right. I was feeling pretty down. That's important. That guy died so that I wouldn't feel like that. That's a good point. So okay. That's important. But a lot of people get lost in this, like, I don't have what I want, so I need to die. And it's,
Yeah, and then like I said, now we're creating a culture in a society that's just like, oh, you feel bad, you feel depressed, you ever consider killing yourself?
Right, and it's not just something you say on the internet in a COD lobby, like you're actually giving someone a business card that'll lead them to that process.
And then this is where the demonic aspect of it comes from, because you're telling people there's no God, life has no meaning, so you're making them depressed. Then they get so depressed to the point where they want to kill themselves. Then you present them a solution to where they kill themselves, but because they've rejected God their entire life, and you purposely separate them from the gospel, when they do kill themselves, they're going to end up in hell for the rest of eternity, which means that the suffering...
at night.
Yeah, the suffering that you thought was so overbearing that if I just die, then it all goes away. That's the demonic lie, because the reality is you're going to kill yourself. You're going to end up in hell, where the suffering is going to be far worse than it ever was when you were actually alive, and there's going to be no escape from it whatsoever. And then the demons laugh at you for an eternity.
It's very hard to tell people that there is a plan for them when they don't see that plan manifesting in front of them, and they're in a dire situation. And one of the things that always help is to just remind them from the passage from the Bible that says, the God will provide. The birds have what they need. They do not have to work. They don't have to stress and strain. The birds have what they need to survive. You will have it too. And it is that simple. If you put your faith in it, it's not going to be glorious. You're not going to go around in gold Bentleys. But as it says earlier in the Bible, from that point, it's easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. And it's very important to remember what this earthly life is before you get to New Jerusalem. This sense of wealth, this sense of property, control, really, would probably be where it's at. That's going to be completely irrelevant in New Jerusalem. It's not going to be a concern that you have at all. Mm-hmm. You won't even have the body that plagues you now. So
I think there's even passage in Isaiah that basically states that your needs will be met before you even think of asking them, as it relates to the millennial reign and the 1,000 years of Christ and all that good stuff. But if you don't believe in that, how do you instill any hope of people that there is a better future along the way, right? And that's part of, like I said, creating a quote unquote a secular worldview where you separate people from Christ, and that's the end result of doing so.
And we even do this in our media now, where we simply do not portray a world that is in good shape. There's always some moral decay in the middle of it now. The good guys are always tainted by some kind of evil. Their goals are always weaker than the bad guy, and the bad guy's just doing it because he drank the wrong super soldier serum. That's all that makes him evil, is he's red and not blue. And that's just, it portrays a world in which solutions are final, whereas we know that does not exist in our realm, and it won't exist until Christ returns.
And again, it goes all the way back to Isaiah 5:20, evil, good, good, evil. Oh, the heroes that you think are heroes, they're not really heroes. The people who you think are bad, they're not really bad.
Right, exactly. You know, Thanos wasn't wrong. It's a fun meme, but ultimately he wanted to wipe out half the life in the universe because he thought there wouldn't be an abundance for everybody to live off of. And the Marvel Universe tried to present that to you.
Killmonger, go back to Black Panther. People thought Killmonger was a hero. He wanted to start a global race war and kill white children. But in the eyes of certain people who just so happen to be on the left, he's a hero.
Right. Even because of that.
Mm-hmm. Witchcraft, very, very popular. The occult, very more prevalent in our culture now than it was 20 years ago, definitely. But you see this in movies and television shows now where witchcraft, occultism, Satanism, all over television, it's just more upright and in your face now than it was at any point beforehand. Beforehand, it was subtle because they couldn't directly associate with it. But now everyone's into New Age. Everyone's into witchcraft and Wicca and all this other stuff. And Satanism is on the rise. People are flirting with the occult. So all of these things are just being popularized right in your eyes, right in your face. And like I said, Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness came out a couple of years ago. I had non-believers, atheists, tell me how shocked they were by, this is their words, how demonic the movie was, because they identified the symbols that were in that movie and they realized those were real occult symbols. It was not just a bunch of Hollywood gobbledygook. And they were like, no, this is like real occult stuff. You've heard people from the Netflix show of Sabrina saying how they're doing real occult rituals. That Star Wars series with the guy and his witch wife, they put real witchcraft in that series and then just masked it with a little bit of Star Wars so you didn't think that it was real. You do that all the time. And yeah, there's a lot of these going on now all over the world because they want you to believe, oh, we're not really doing these things. It's just a big rib to make the Christians upset. But even the people who are involved with this, like, no, they're actually really doing this. And it's all in your face. And like I said, the penalty for witchcraft is very, very dire, because not only is it another way to directly open yourself up to demonic possession, and not only just demonic possession, but some very serious, very nasty demons in your life. But even God himself says that the penalty for witchcraft is certainly death. But here we have a lot of ancient paganism and worship of Ishtar and Baal and all of these. Like I said, you can go back to, what is it, New Age that's being prophesized among people, yoga, witchcraft, Wicca. All this stuff has all been normalized in our society just in the last 10 years alone.
Though, stretching is not satanic. Yoga applies a spirituality to channeling the energies that are not proper to the human body.
Yes.
Channeling an outside energy that is not the Spirit of God. The Holy Spirit, sorry.
To put it into perspective, it's not primarily just the stretching that's demonic. Is when you applicate the New Age Hinduism aspect of the yoga that opens yourself up to the demonic world.
And that's the point, is that, yes, you can stretch in the morning. It's not a bad thing. It's probably good for you to get your blood flowing and make sure your hips aren't locked. Your sciatic nerves, BITCH sometimes. But the trouble is that this idea of yoga is so confused with an athletic activity now, as opposed to the spiritual ritual where it comes from. That is a spiritual ritual to channel the energies of one of their deities into your body, and that there's a universal energy that you are channeling through your chakra ports or whatever, like you're some kind of cosmic circuit breaker and you're flipping the switches so you've got more power and agency over your life. It's still another form of manipulating God's creation. Rather, just stretch and take a breath. And you don't have to worry about calling it downward facing dog. You know, you don't have to worry about calling it all these weird names. You're just stretching to make sure that your hip doesn't lock up.
Yeah, right. A couple of ones here, then we'll wrap this up here. Hate speech laws, censorship. Here's what it ultimately comes down to, because this has been something, again, last 10-something years, normalized hate speech. We got to censor hate speech. Well, what is hate speech? It's ultimately anything that goes against their ideology and narrative. And what goes against their...
It could be week to week. Now it's okay to be a Nazi.
Yeah. And what is it coming down to here? The Bible. Because just like in Canada recently, certain verses of the Bible as it relates to the LGBTQ has now become hate speech. And they'll arrest you for citing those verses. Those verses that they try to gaslight you into believing that they're not really talking about homosexuality, they're now saying that you can't use those because they're bigoted. Or guess what? When we start kneeling more to the tenets of Islam, then all of a sudden the Bible is going to be an even bigger problem, because just like all Islamic societies, anyone who believes in the authority and the value of scripture, they're going to be tossed away and possibly killed, because you're not allowed to call the Prophet Muhammad a liar. You can't do that.
It's pretty crazy when Canada becomes less restrictive to homosexual things than China. China doesn't allow same-sex marriage, and they've recently banned girly men and homosexual men from appearing in media, period. So, and they are bosom buddies with Canada. Interesting.
Yep. And then, of course, here, this is the final tenet, the celebration of political murder. This is now... So... everything that we put together, again, so much anti-humanism, nihilism, absurdism, nonsense, and a political ideology and identity that so many people gravitate towards, the only logical conclusion that we get to a point where we start openly celebrating the murder of people who we don't like. So we've talked about the assassination of Charlie Kirk here on this show and how the left reacted to that, celebrating that. I'm pretty sure you guys have seen the videos over the course of the last couple of days about how people are using the sound of Charlie getting murdered as a TikTok trend now. So now people are using the sound of a murder to do TikTok videos. And that's normalized, and that's funny to the left. It's funny when you do that, but if you were to make a trans joke about a trans person killing themselves, that's like the worst thing in the entire world now, right? That's wicked and evil, but this is what they're doing behind closed doors. The glorification of the Luigi character who shot and murdered that healthcare CEO for the sole reason that he was a healthcare CEO, so he must have been the bad guy, so he's now our hero. And then there's people on the left who unironically heroize and lionizes a murderer from that regard. Then, of course, we have the multiple attempts on Donald Trump's life that we've seen over the course of the last couple of years now. And every time it happens, the left gets very, very giddy. Then they get depressed because Trump didn't really die, but it only just stokes their desire to see him get murdered because that's how much they hate him, right? So it all comes back around to kind of the late stages of evil where these people are revealing themselves to be pro-murder. And they're not only pro-murder, they're pro-murder of people who oppose them, who just so happen to be you, the Christians. Again, Charlie Kirk could have been no different than any other run-of-the-mill Christian out there. In the political world, before he was killed, he was considered milquetoast by many people on the political right. There was a lot of people who really didn't associate with Charlie Kirk because they were probably further to the right on political issues than he was. But you see how gleeful the left was when he got murdered in front of the entire world because of what he represented. And what he represented was a right-wing Christian male. And that's all that's all that mattered to them at the end of the day. So when you combine all of this stuff together, essentially what you have created here, you have created a political ideology and a political theology that has become cultural to a large group of people, not just in this country, but in the entire world, that at every single step of the way, they identify with what is open rebellion against the word of God. And we're coming up on a time period, it may be sooner than we all think, where the chickens are going to come home to roost, where God is not going to be mocked. He's allowing you to laugh and get your little giggles in now, but there's going to come a heavy, heavy price to pay for all of this, because God is going to remember every single thing that you did to every single one of his saints. Like, there's verses in Revelation 17 talking about the harlot of Babylon, about how God remembers the blood of the saints and the prophets that she spilled hundreds of years ago. So God's not going to forget anything that's happened here. What you guys need to understand is that he has given you a very short window to seek forgiveness for what you have done. But that window is going to close. And when that window closes, you're going to have two options. You're either going to serve Christ and ask Christ for forgiveness, and that in of itself may end up costing you your life. Or secondly, you can join the side that you're basically already on to begin with, the side of Satan. And that's going to lead you to an entire eternity of misery and torment, and it's going to be all of your choosing here. So again, when we unpack what we like to call the progressive movement, the Democrat, socialists, the commies, the Marxists, however name makes you comfortable with associating with, ask yourself, where is the core tenets of all of these beliefs actually come from? They don't come from God. So if they don't come from God, where else would they come from? And now you can understand why a certain group of people in our country and all over the world act in the manner that they do, because ultimately they are serving an ideology that serves Satan by biblical definition. And this is where we're at.
And they make it obvious now. It's not even an attempt to try and hide this or try to, make a joke about it or anything like that. It's straight on devil worship. It's straight on, like, get into this. Like, when was the last time that Lady Gaga did a performance where she looked like she was emerging from heaven? No, It's always some type of demonic sex thing that she's got going on now.
Yeah.
Same thing with the majority of these people. Even Kanye has this weird thing about being king of earth, standing on top of the earth as some giant. So it is...
he literally did an album calling himself Jesus. So he literally thinks he's God in his own mind.
Well, and again, I mean, like we're seeing, like Sakura Mita points this out. Animal Farm, that movie comes from Angel Studios, the same studios that put out The Sound of Freedom. Yeah. So no institution is safe from this corruption. You're not going to have a safe place. That God made it known to us that there would be no corner on the earth where you wouldn't escape persecution. You may not be nailed to a cross, you may not be burned alive, but it will not be cool to be Christian.
Yeah, like, obviously there's degrees of persecution. I mean, let's be honest. There are people in Syria and Nigeria who are being straight up murdered for just believing in Jesus Christ. And they're getting violently murdered in places of the world here too. But even here in the West, well, you may not be getting murdered for your beliefs, but you're definitely going to get ostracized for your beliefs. You're definitely going to lose friends and family members from your beliefs. You're going to find it harder to believe what you believe because the world and the culture has essentially taken the Antichrist position and have popularized that. So all of a sudden, if you stand for any biblical values, you're going to be viewed as an enemy of the world.
Right.
So, and these are the things that, it's only going to escalate from here. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get more tighter for a lot of people out there. So next week, I'm going to hold back of my second part for this one, because like I said, next week I really want to talk about something that has been a cancer in our culture for really the last 20 years, primarily the last 10. It is this belief system of, or I guess this philosophy, I guess you can say, of nihilism and absurdism. And I want to kind of show people how these ideologies have been basically drenched in our culture when it comes to movies, television, entertainment, because we consume this worldview that promotes this Antichrist viewpoint, this life is meaningless, there's no meaning to life, do as thou wilt, and then you wonder why we're in the situation that we are. But I want to expose on a cultural level how this gets infiltrated and basically normalized in our society, because there are so many people who have adopted the tenets of these two demonic ideologies, and our culture and our society has gotten aggressively worse as a result of this. So I think it's time to shed a little bit of a light on this. And then in 2 weeks, I want to get back to a little study on Revelation, talking about war in the time of the tribulation too, because as we talked about here, there's a lot of people out there who are openly pushing for the murder of people who they don't like. And one day they're going to get what they claim that they want, and it's not going to go very well for those people. So any last words from you, Cider, on this topic?
No, I just want to thank God that we have an outlet like this, a place to discuss these ideas, and that we're all, at least granted the grace to know what's going on around us, as opposed to being swept up in this madness like some other folks that we know in this world. So,
yeah. And like I said, be glad that we have this platform while we do, because who knows how much longer that's going to last, Like I said, we're still under the thumb of Google at the end of the day, and we all know Google's not nearly the friend of Christian worldviews. So, like I said, enjoy it while you can. Letting you guys know what I got coming up this week, just real quick. This coming week, we're going to have 2 episodes of The Barroom. This Tuesday will be the final Tuesday episode of The Barroom, episode 199. And then on Friday will be our first Friday night Barroom. First time in maybe 3 years that we've done a Barroom on a Friday night. But we're going back to our original night on Friday. We're going to have a bunch of people joining us there. We're going to do a little movie watching. We're making a little bit of a movie night, because there's a movie that's been annoying me since 2008. And I want you guys to all share in my misery of how dumb this film is. It's not Speed Racer. And it's not Speed Racer. No, I under no circumstances I'm going to sit through Speed Racer whatsoever. But we'll do that. So I got 2 episodes coming up this week. Those are both going to be Rumble exclusives. The next episode of Digimon Revelation premieres at 7. I already got it set, so the next episode will be up tonight. I only got about 17 episodes left, so we're coming up on the home stretch. And there's been some teasers to things that are definitely going to happen. But I'll just put it to you this way. If you guys are like, where are the Digimon battles? They're coming. They're very subtly coming. So it's like you got to give them just a little bit of a breadcrumbs to keep them interested. And then when they get it, they're going to get it. So with that said, Cider, anything you want to promote before we get out of here?
Nope. I'm just a dude. I do things.
I'm just a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude. Well, very much, guys. Thank you guys for joining us here. Hopefully we will see you guys Tuesday, if not Friday, if not next Sunday when we do this again. Adios, goodbye, and good night.
Once I turned to Jesus and I realized how he had changed my outlook on life, not just softball, but understanding how much I have to live for, and that's living to exemplify the kingdom. And I think that brings so much freedom.
David, I know share a strong faith. How does that help you on a night like tonight?
It's everything. Christ's resurrection is everything. Not just his life, but his death and resurrection. You can only get that through him, the Holy Spirit only through him. No false prophets, no Muhammad, no anyone else. Only Jesus Christ himself.
Let me tell you one more thing. This might be the most important thing you'll ever hear. There is true freedom, a freedom that no one can take from you in the name of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Don't ever forget that. If you remember one thing I say, remember that.
And I've got lots to tell you. Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved.
Is that your reaction to what people who want you off this property shortly?
Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you'll be saved.
And what about you being stripped of your belt? I mean, that's you must be very unhappy with that. What's your reaction to that?
Jesus loves me. He loves you too, and he loves you too. He loves these people in here, and he loves everybody in the world. All you've got to do is repent of your sins, and you will be forgiven.